Hey guys, I'm John.
And I'm Alton.
And we are doing a fun show today about addiction and overcoming them. And we hope that you'll enjoy it. Guys, this is the deciding factor.
Everyday life issues broken down to help you build your own opinions on the issues that matter most. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, this is The Deciding Factor with your host, Alton Hill and John Herzog.
All right, guys. Like I said, we're going to do a show about addictions. And our guest today is Braca Getz. And she is actually Harvard educated. She has written 38 children's books, but the most important one is her most recent one, which is Searching for God in the Garbage. It is a memoir about overcoming her food addiction and the journey that she was on. So we welcome you. How are you doing?
Wonderful. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. Welcome.
So I was shocked by the title of your book to start with. I've got to jump right into it. So me and Alton, we go to the same church, and right away I was thinking, wow, finding God in the garbage. Tell us, first off, how did you come up with that title? And then kind of fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, it's a jarring title, because how do you put those two words in the same phrase, God and garbage? But I don't know. It's kind of sad, but in many ways, I think nowadays it's almost a dirty word, actually. Like, you kind of can't say it in certain company. You have to be really careful what you say. And I find myself actually being careful. Can I talk about God now or not? I'm not sure. So the thing is that I didn't know that I was searching for God, but I was searching for years. From like age 12, it started. It was like I suddenly woke up, like, what's the purpose of life? I started searching, and I was searching in a number of different religions. And I was searching in all kinds of areas: environmentalism, social action, experimenting with drugs. I mean, all kinds of ways I was looking for what was the purpose. And I couldn't believe that all I saw, this was all there was to life. I couldn't believe that you just wake up each day to, like, go to work to make money to buy food, to go to work to make money to buy food. Like, what's the purpose of it all? There's got to be more to life than that. So the title of the book is about searching for God in the garbage, in that metaphoric way. But actually, I was literally doing that in the lowest point of my life. When I was really involved in the throes of food addiction, it's the most embarrassing, I would say, part of the book most people feel, but I'm going through garbage pails looking for food, and it was really bizarre behavior that I was doing. At the end of the book...
Were you really looking through the garbage?
I was looking for food that was thrown away in the garbage.
Really? Wow.
And I didn't, but why was I doing this crazy behavior? Like, you'll see that something I've learned about addictions is that there's tons of bizarre behavior involved in addictions. People do all kinds of crazy things. This was, I would say, the craziest thing that I was doing. And like, people that know me now, they go, how could you put that in your book? How could you let people read that you were doing, like, these embarrassing things, But I have, like, nothing I have no skeletons in my closet now. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing there. Like, I have shared it all. It's a very freeing feeling to know that. And it helps other people to open up and know that you could share these embarrassing things and you could still have a wonderful life after that, So, but my point was, the amazing thing about this book, all my books are really short books for children, except for this one memoir. And the thing is, I didn't really write this book. It's it's just, I compiled it from the diaries that I found, the journals I found, and letters. I put it all together. I added some stuff in to put it all together, but it kind of wrote itself. And so what happened is, while I was compiling the book, when I got to the end of the book, I had an epiphany, and I finally understood why I was searching for God in the garbage. Why was I searching in garbage pails for food? Because I felt that something valuable had been thrown away, and I was going to redeem it. I was going to find what was still had value that was being tossed in the garbage. This sounds really crazy, but that's the metaphor for what I was doing. And at the end of the book, I'm kind of telling you the surprise ending, but really, I figured that at the end of the book, I finally understood what was going on. Like, that's what I was really doing. I was redeeming this stuff because it still had value, and people would toss it away. Like half a sandwich that nobody wanted anymore. There it was in the garbage, you know? And this was something that I actually ended up doing because, in a sense, I felt like my heritage had been thrown away, and I had to rediscover it. I had to find it and uncover it and redeem its value. And that's how I ended up finally nourishing my soul and finding out the purpose to life. And that's how it all happened. But this is something that Carl Jung taught, that when people act out their mental illness, it's kind of, they're acting out a metaphor for something they're really trying to say. It's like a message to themselves. I was studying to be a psychiatrist. After I graduated from Harvard, I went on to medical school, and that's where I was going, to be a psychiatrist. So this is what fascinated me, and I see that that was happening in my own life. I was acting out that message the message was to myself. It was a cry for help, that I was searching for what still had value in the world. And yeah, right. And that's what Carl Jung would speak about, how what people do in their mental illness is a metaphor. Like, for instance, when I was still at Harvard, I was volunteering in a mental hospital, a state mental hospital. And there was a man there. We were working with, this was when they were taking people out of mental hospitals and setting them up in like apartments, co-op apartments, to work together and manage out in the community. It was a terrible thing that happened. But this is how so many homeless people ended up on the street, because they couldn't manage. So we were involved with helping to train, as a volunteer, we were helping to train them for real life out in the world. So there was one man, and he was describing how he was being allowed to walk down out of the hospital into the bar down the block. And when he'd go in the bar, he was telling me the story. When I'd go in the bar, everybody started shooting at me the minute I got in there. The bullets were flying.
Wow.
So what he was really telling me was, people were laughing at him. People were hurting him. He was feeling the pain. It was coming at him. Like, in other words, mental illness speaks in metaphors a lot, and he had no other way to describe it. It felt like the minute he opened the door, people were just shooting him. It's like, I don't know, it's just an example that I carry with me of how things go.
So, but what was weird is, we were talking before the show, and you weren't fat. You didn't have that kind of an issue. So it's really weird to hear that you were digging through the garbage to find food, but yet you don't have a weight problem. But you had anorexia issues. Is that right?
I fluctuated between anorexic behaviors and binge eating. So when I wasn't starving, I was eating in this crazy, desperate way where nothing was ever enough. And actually, that was the scarier part than the anorexia, when it was this desperate searching, because I could never fill the emptiness inside. There was no end. I would just eat this and then go on to that and go. It was like just endless eating. And I feel that people that have an overeating problem, I can relate to that problem still today, because the lessons that I learned from those experiences, they relate to anybody with an overeating problem, because if they're overeating, they're not feeling a physical hunger. They're feeling a different type of hunger that's inside. And what I believe is that it's a spiritual hunger, that it's a bottomless pit unless you fill it with what you're really hungry for.
So how long did this last? Like, was this years, decades,
Right.
millennials?
So the book starts at age 12, when I just start with that awareness of searching for something more, and feeling like something was missing from my life, although I didn't know what was missing.
So really,
So
that far ago, 12?
what?
If that far ago, when you were 12, that's
When I
when
was
this all?
12 is when I started knowing that there was more to life than just this, and wondering what it was, I didn't know, did I have a soul? I mean, my parents were like beautiful, such sweet, wonderful people, but they were not spiritual, and they didn't know where I was coming from. Like, why aren't you just happy with life the way it is, But like, this is all there is. There's something more. There's something missing. That's why I think I'm like a perfect example of, because I'm like a control factor. I really had everything else in life. My parents were just like very loving people. They gave me all the love that I needed, and we just lived this sweet, modest life. And then I was, I worked a lot on education, and I went to Harvard, and I'm going off track. But I want to say that when at Harvard, I felt like I got to be where everybody wants to be. I was at this like garden party with like the children of all these really famous people, like the Kennedys and the Rockefellers, Moynihans. And I felt like at this party, this is where everybody wants to be. This is what I've been striving for. And this is what, maybe this is it. This is where you want to be. And I discovered there that all the people there were looking for something more too. They were looking beyond each other. They wanted more from life. It was kind of boring to them too. And then on this beautiful garden party day, suddenly the cloud filled up with the sky filled up with clouds, and there was a big thunderstorm, and everybody starts running from the party. And I got so excited. I said, I got to be at this party with like the children of the most famous, powerful people, and they couldn't even stop the rain from coming down. Like there's something more. There's something more than being powerful and famous. There's something greater. I don't know what it is, but I've been to the top. I feel like I've been to where I was striving to be, and there's nothing up there. So it was proof to me there was something more.
Yeah.
But I totally lost what your question was, and I went on to that story.
Well, let me ask, though, because I think that's... it sounds like you had kind of made it where everyone told you, like, this is what you should be trying to do, and you got there, but then there wasn't any fulfillment. But the reality was you were searching for a long time, maybe following a path, and then you found that it was empty, and maybe you recognized that there was some emptiness in the people around you too. I mean, would you say that generally most people are empty like that, or
no?
searching,
and I don't want to dismiss them as being empty at all. I want to see that they were people that wanted more from life too. So that wasn't all there was to it. Like I had some talks with Caroline Kennedy about Judaism. It was really like they were people that were also searching. You know what I mean? She was in my dorm, and we had some interesting talks. So no, I think that they were all looking for more. Empty in the sense that people want more from life. Yes.
Right.
And I remember what your other question was too. That I was like I was chubby, but I was never like obese or anything like that. But when I then I started dieting. I don't know how old was I, maybe 16, 15. I became aware that I was a little bit overweight, so I started dieting. And then I saw that had such a great reaction, and people got a lot of compliments that I looked better. So I kept it up and I got thinner, but I was never like, I was never dangerously thin. I think the lowest weight, I was 95 pounds, and I was 5'4" at 95, so that's really skinny. But it wasn't like, I was not like emaciated or like needed to be hospitalized. I never got that ill. And I was never diagnosed as being anorexic, but I was studying this.
Did you tell them you were digging through the garbage?
That was, I got to that point in medical school. But when I was at Harvard, I started, this is so typical, of course, I started studying anorexia. Meanwhile, I was sick with it myself or getting sicker, and I was studying it. I became like an expert on it there. And in fact, I ended up doing research and writing a chapter and helping to edit a book, Women Look at Biology, Looking at Women. And I talked about why so many women are anorexic, why it's a female problem mainly like that. So I was doing a ton of research. I'd give talks on it. People would come to my talks, and a lot of people that were anorexic would show up too. They would be looking for answers from me, and I was suffering myself. It was like, and that just shows you that a person can have an intellectual understanding of something. It's not enough. It's not enough to help the person, because I knew that something was wrong with my behavior, and I wanted to get better, but that wasn't enough to do it,
So you made the point that anorexia is more of a girl's issue. So does that mean that the overeating might be more of a male issue?
I don't think so. Well, anorexics, because women, it's such a big deal for women to be skinny. Women are so, there's so much media input about that, and in very confusing stuff too, because in magazines, women's magazines will have a whole bunch of articles about dieting, and the other pages will be about recipes about how to make strawberry shortcake and things like that. It's such a confusion, So the women are getting all kinds of mixed up messages, and I was so mixed up myself, So although I didn't appear to be, and like I said, I appeared to be a success on the outside. I looked very successful, and here I was graduating from Harvard, going on to medical school, and I was getting sicker and sicker and more miserable all the time. So that's how my life was going. And basically, in other words, it was all abnormal eating. Either I was eating a couple of carrots and a yogurt during the day, and then the next day I'd be so hungry that I'd eat crazy amounts of food. So it was like, it had nothing to do with my own hunger, how I was eating. It was just totally whacked out,
So let's change gears. Now that we've got kind of your backstory, let's look into the details of the spirituality. Are you referring more to godly spirituality, or I hate to phrase it this way, but I'm going to, is more of the hippie spirituality, like they talk about?
Okay, I think what I'm talking about can be applied to anybody, any type of spirituality. Anyone, if you accept that you are a spiritual being. My main point is that we're spiritual beings housed in physical bodies, and that we're all souls, really, traveling through this world, but the clothing that we wear is our physical body. So that's my main emphasis, that we are spiritual beings. And so that can relate to anybody that deals with spirituality in any form. For me, this is what's fascinating. I was searching into Christian Science, and I was searching into different branches of Buddhism, again, with all my, searching. And And I found elements of truth in everything. But until I found out about my own heritage, when I went to Israel, the summer between my first year of medical school and my second year, it fit like the missing puzzle piece. I was brought up Jewish, but not in a spiritual way, in a cultural way more.
Mhm.
So I really didn't understand about the depths of spirituality. I didn't even know that Judaism was spiritual until I got to study it in depth that summer in Israel. And I went there to volunteer at Hadassah Hospital. I was working on the oncology ward. But before I went, I contacted a friend of mine who had become an Orthodox Jew. He wasn't brought up that way. He was brought up like me. We'd gone to kindergarten together, So I sent him a letter in Israel, and I said to him, I'm coming to Israel for the summer, for 6 weeks, and I want to be a psychiatrist, and I want to be able to help people know what's the purpose of life. Why is life worth living? Because I feel like I don't know. And he said to me, forget about your patients. I'm going to help you to find out what the purpose of life is. So when I got there, he took me to these different schools. They were for adult beginners learning about Judaism, and that's how when I entered these classes, I didn't understand half of what they were talking about because a lot of the words were in Hebrew, and I didn't know Hebrew. Very few words.
And Hebrew is a really difficult one to talk about.
It's the easiest language there is.
Really?
It's totally based on, like, there aren't exceptions like there are in English.
Mhm.
It's a language that makes complete sense. It's like an incredible language that way. So it's the easiest language to learn. And so many languages are based on it. But anyway, so what happened is I didn't know half of what they were talking about, but the minute I got in there, I felt like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what my soul needed. It fit in. I can't explain it. I was sitting there drawing pictures because I also love to draw creatures. And I'm drawing this creature jumping off the world screaming, yay. That's what because as the person's talking, some rabbi's talking, and I'm drawing these crazy pictures because I felt like, I think I'm finding what I've been looking for. All the pieces of truth from the different religions I was getting too, but this is me. I was made as a Jewish soul, and this is the nourishment that my soul needs, and it's fitting in perfectly now. So it was like an amazing experience. And when I wrote the book, I still didn't understand. My family didn't understand. How was I able to overcome the food addictions? I actually never got therapy, which I mean, therapy is a wonderful thing for people, that whoever needs it, especially
There's
a
been
person.
different types.
Yeah, if a person has been through abuse or neglect in childhood, then sometimes, and very often, the spiritual nourishment that a person needs, it can't even get through without therapeutic help because there's so many blockages. But I didn't have those blockages. That's why I feel like I'm a control, because I really had a wonderful childhood, and the only thing that was missing was the spiritual nourishment in my life. So I feel like I'm a person that had everything but that. And when I finally got it, that's why I was able to heal without going through the therapeutic interventions. And I was able from that point on to be able to help other people and share that if you get this spiritual nourishment, then you will be able to fill the emptiness within that creates many addictions that are now widespread in the world.
Well, I was just thinking about your journey and how it kind of reminded me of Solomon's journey almost. Like he had this, he knew God, but yet he still tried to find pleasure in all of these things. And I'm just wondering, how familiar are you with his story, and do you feel like yours and his relate at all, or?
I know what you're saying. Yeah. And that's why I kind of I would like to share about the pleasure ladder and what I've learned about that. Yeah, okay.
The pleasure ladder.
Yeah.
Is that in the book too?
Well, yes and no. These are things also that I've just, part of it is because what happened was I met this rabbi, such an unusual rabbi. He's no longer alive. Yeah, Rabbi Noach Weinberg, and he started this yeshiva called Esha Torah. And what he said was the purpose of life is to experience the greatest pleasure possible. And this was something I had never heard anything like. You know, people think religion is very serious. I mean, it's like, what does that mean? The purpose of life is to experience the greatest pleasure possible. And then he describes that there's 5 levels. There's 5 levels of pleasure. And what I learned, really, the recent part that I learned is that these 5 levels of pleasure are not arbitrary. If you've ever heard of Kabbalah, it's ancient mystical writings that explain that there's 5 levels to the human soul. So these 5 levels of pleasure correspond to the 5 levels of the human soul. That's what's so amazing. And they correspond like so beautifully.
So what are the 5 levels?
Yes. So the bottom level.
I'm eager.
Yay. Yeah. The bottom level are the physical pleasures. So like you were saying with King Solomon, the bottom level are all the physical pleasures. That's why with addictions, we get stuck on the physical pleasures. We don't recognize that there's an abundance of higher levels of pleasure, deeper levels of pleasure, and we get stuck on the physical levels of pleasure. Why? Because they give us immediate pleasure. Immediate, and although they're fleeting, they are immediate and they're easy to get. They're very easy to get. Not saying that the other levels are not easy to get too, but so food, even from the Bible, it was right away, food was misused. It was like in the Garden of Eden, there was disordered eating to begin with. So it's a problem. Really, this world was created to give us pleasure. That was the purpose of this whole world. Like food could have been made tasteless, and it could have had no aroma and no color.
But then Eve would have never ate that apple if it wasn't delicious, right?
Yeah. It's meant, and so instead it was infused with tons of pleasure. We could just take a pill every day, and that would have been the fuel that we needed for our lives. But that's not how it was designed. It was designed amazingly, where the trees become, the fruit on the tree become brightest, most exciting when they're ripe and ready for us to eat them. So everything is meant to give us tremendous pleasure. So
then what's level number 2?
Oh, okay. So level number 2 is love. And love is not and the way the rabbi explained it is, love is not sitting around waiting for it to come into your life, because that really makes people miserable. Love is appreciating something about somebody else outside of yourself. Love is focusing on the virtues of another. When we love somebody, we're focusing on their virtues. So that's the kind of love. When we do that, each level up brings more connection and takes us out of ourselves more. So that's we're able to focus on another person. That's the second level of pleasure. When we focus on what we appreciate about another, that's how we bring love into our lives. And everybody can do that. Nobody has to sit and wait for love. It's all empowering. Each level of pleasure we can bring into our lives.
But if you have an addiction with drugs and alcohol, how does the second rung love apply? Are you in love with the product or drug that you're taking, or is it still a love for someone else because of it?
when you're stuck on an addiction, you're stuck on the first level of pleasure. You're getting pleasure from the drug or alcohol that you're taking,
Mm-hmm.
and you're stuck there because it's a feeling of scarcity. The reason why people have addictions is because they're not experiencing enough pleasure in their life. If a person is experiencing pleasure, then they recognize that there's an abundance of pleasure in the world, then they don't get stuck on an addiction because they can move on to a different pleasure. But when you're frightened, when you feel that there's a scarcity, then you get stuck there because that you feel that's the only place I'm going to get pleasure right now. And that's how people get stuck in addictions. So
So you go from the pleasure to loving others when you're starting to move on. And am I hearing this right? Am I following
it
along?
sounds like, Braca, what you're saying is that if we're stuck with only at the bottom rung, we can't really move up to level 2, right?
well,
True?
actually, I'm saying that if you're stuck on a certain physical, you can actually sub in a different pleasure, sub in a greater pleasure. So what I'm saying is the way to heal is to keep adding greater pleasures into your life. So let's say you're stuck on food. Let's say you feel like overeating right this moment. You press, all you have to move is your little finger. You press a button, you turn on music, you start dancing and stretching. Suddenly you don't feel like overeating anymore. You're subbing in music. You are feeling a different physical pleasure, but it is affecting your soul and bringing pleasure to the physical level of your soul. The lowest level of your soul is attached to your physical body. So you're bringing in pleasure through the music, or you open a window, or you go outside. You feel the sunshine on your face. You feel a gentle breeze. Suddenly, you don't feel like overeating anymore. You're engaged in another type of pleasure, a physical pleasure from nature. You don't even have to move up the ladder. You just substitute in a different pleasure.
Just
More
don't
healthy.
jump out the window. Okay, so we go from pleasure, the physical pleasure, to love. What's the next 3?
The next level up is meaning, adding more meaning to your life, doing something positive in the world that brings meaning to your life. Each level up brings, again, a wider connection to the world, and it brings you a more lasting pleasure.
And then
So
4?
Fourth level is creativity. When we are involved in creativity, and you'll notice that each one also is emulating God more closely too. So as we move up the ladder, creativity, when we are involved doing something creative and positive in the world, we don't feel like eating, we don't feel like sleeping. We're in the zone where we are in just such great lasting happiness. And these are things that stay with us forever, the joy that we get from doing these things. So that's the fourth level of pleasure, is creativity.
I kind of feel like David Letterman. And number 5.
5, okay. 5 is transcendence. It is awe. It is recognizing the unity of everybody and everything in the universe, that we are all connected. This is the highest level, and we don't stay at that level. In this world, we don't stay at the highest level. We can't stay at the 4th or the 5th level on a permanent basis, but we get glimpses of those levels. That's really for the next world, where there's a pleasure that is so infinite we can't even imagine it, but we get glimpses of it in this world, of how pleasurable life could be. Even under a starry night, you have a sense, you have a glimpse of transcendence. You're just laying out there, and also creativity is kind of the border between, giving birth is kind of a border between creativity and transcendence. It's like a moment of such awe, and it's ultimate creativity as well. These moments, they don't last forever, but they stay with a person forever. So those are the 5 levels of pleasure that correspond to the 5 levels of the human soul.
Yeah, that's that's interesting that you're.
I need you to break that down. My ADHD
No. This
kicked in
is
slowly, and I think I'd be stuck at the physical the whole damn time.
so like so the other day I stopped at Wendy's, and I got to get my like triple baconator or whatever because
you're addicted to
it may
bacon.
sound like I have an eating disorder. I'm trying to put on weight right now, so it's actually just it's very uncomfortable for me to eat the amount of food that I have to eat right now to gain weight. I enjoy fasting and not eating, actually, but anyway. When I'm paying for my baconator, the lady there says, and I'm going to regret saying this on a podcast, but I don't care. She's like, "Hey, do you want to buy this coupon book of Frosties for $1? It goes to the Dave Foundation or whatever." I'm like, $1 for 5 Frosties? Sure, I'll help out. I'll donate, right? And
somebody's getting gypped in your family because there's 6 of y'all.
so that was at the first window, and then I go to the next window, and where I'm actually going to receive my food, and I'm looking at the girl there. She's really nice, friendly, and bubbly, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I'm probably gonna, I don't know when I'm going to come back here, and then I have to have the kids, and do I really want to give my kids anyway? I hand it to the lady there, and I just say, you know what? At some point during the day, some mom is going to come through here with the kids, and they're going to be nuts. And I just want you to give her some free Frosties and tell her that some really handsome guy wanted her to have this. And she was like, "Oh, thank you. You're so nice." And I got to be honest, like I can't even really claim a lot of credit. Probably it was just me being lazy and, not wanting to waste the thing. But I tell you, when I drove out of there, I felt so good, which is why I'm regretting saying this, because I feel like if you're doing good things and telling people about it, it kind of cancels it out. But I wanted to make the point about how I have a pretty pleasurable life. I do a lot of things that I really enjoy. And as I'm driving away, imagining this mom who's ready to like scream at her kids getting, these free Frosties from this random guy, I was just really filled with joy in that concept that I'm never going to know how that goes. But I just love thinking about that idea. And when I'm thinking about the latter you were describing, like to me, I kind of like that was my meaning. That was my contribution of, I'm just doing this. And
so you're on 4 or 5?
No, I think for me that was number 3, but it was definitely Braca, the word that you used was deeper pleasure or joy. And I guess my point with that story was I was really surprised by how much joy I had from that $1 that I donate. It's like not even a big deal. I'll give anybody $1, but man, it had so much impact on my soul and the joy. I was like, man, this is awesome. I need to do more of this.
So I've got to ask, when we talk about spirituality, our deciding factor is, can spirituality be a key to overcoming addictions? So I guess diving into the more spirituality of it, right? When I think about it is like when you have an issue with family, or if you do have an addiction, it's from our perspective in church, we start doing more prayers, or we lean on others more. So I guess give me something good on how this spirituality can really kick us in the butt and do some good.
Well, I mean, everything you're saying is great. Prayer is a way of transcending. If you're talking to God, that's phenomenal. That's one of the ways. Another way is studying scriptures in a really deep way and really understanding holy concepts. This is very uplifting for sure, and connecting with other people, as you say, in fellowship for sure. And this is why AA meetings are so positive, especially for the person what they the buddy, I forgot what the word, sponsor, the sponsor.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, this, it's getting out of yourself. It's connecting to another person. And all of this is what it's about. So I'm explaining really the mechanics behind why these things work, because I think people are not aware of this. And that's why I'm loving spreading this information. People are not aware of the 5 levels of the soul, and how, and that life is really meant to be a pleasure. So these are all these ways that you're describing. These are all ways that work, and that's why they work, is because they are feeding the soul. They're nourishing the soul. Exactly.
So looking at some statistics, since I'm the nerd around here, yeah, you know, I looked it up. Eating disorders or food addictions, it actually takes up 70 million people here just in the U.S. That's pretty crazy, right?
Yep.
The other type of addictions was 38%. It's 74% of adults are suffering, and this was back in 2017. 74% of adults are suffering from some sort of substance disorder or addiction.
74%. That's incredible.
74% of Americans are suffering from a substance abuse?
A substance disorder, yeah. That's what it says.
So I guess that's what?
74%
That
of
was
Americans?
high. Yeah.
That's almost everybody. That's really unbelievable. Wow. I mean, like...
And 38% was illicit drug disorder. So...
Yeah, that sounds...
Because, I mean, you got to think, there's any kind of drug disorder, be it, you know, Tylenol, hydrocodone, there's certain ones.
Yeah, I wonder how they...
And that also included alcohol, of course, so...
I think it's easy to be addicted to things, and I think what I'm hearing from you, Braca, is like how you're connecting that to, like, really deep down your soul needs that joy and that pleasure. Maybe that's not necessary, and I don't know if this is how you're saying it, but maybe it's not like the end goal of the pursuit, but that we're made to enjoy these things, and when we're not having those, we're totally missing. And I'm like, when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, I get up, and if I have a food addiction, it's ice cream and coffee. Every morning I want coffee, and I'm thinking, like, it's because early mornings for me are not pleasurable. It's just like, what am I missing? I'm missing coffee. You know, so you could count me into that statistic of having like a caffeine substance abuse, probably. I don't know.
They say it is the most addicting. I'm
not going to deny it.
I wonder if they're counting food as a substance in that percentage. I don't know. I mean, I heard that food is the most addictive thing there is, you know, because, well, first of all, people can't avoid it completely, as you can avoid some other things, you know. So that's a problem. But and think about it, during the pandemic, addictions are rising tremendously, and it's just a huge problem. So and that's the amazing thing, that even in isolation, people can still bring an infinite amount of pleasure into their lives. That's the amazing part of when you understand about the pleasure ladder, and then you could see it more clearly how you can nourish your soul. And maybe, you know, you can't visit elderly people in nursing homes or assisted livings right now, but you can still give them a call. I mean, and how does that make you, but how does it make them feel? How does it make you feel? It helps everybody's soul to shine when you do these things. You know, there's always ways to reach out. Even when right now, I'm not saying during the pandemic, but animal shelters, there's animals that need love. I used to volunteer at an aftercare center for children in the inner city. When walking in, it was shocking. The children would come and start hugging me. They had no idea who I was. It was very sad. They were actually
Alton, because Alton's been known to randomly hug people, even in Lowe's. So
because I know people need it. They need it. I need it. They need it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm trying to unravel this because I know when I think spirituality again, I've never struggled from an addiction yet, so I can't speak from that. I have dealt with depression, right? Went through divorce, and of course, I went to church more during that period of time, but I feel like it was more the people around me that gave me the comfort, going to counseling, things like that. Um, I'm trying to see how the spirituality really would be the key versus, say, the friendship or people giving you that distraction that maybe you need.
We need to have a broader idea of what spirituality encompasses.
Okay.
Spirituality encompasses friendship for sure. It expands our world. It takes us out of just our selfish place and gets us thinking about another, and getting support from other people brings joy into our soul. Friendship isn't uplifting our physical bodies. I mean, it's brightening our souls. It's definitely brightening our emotional state, but it's uplifting us to a place where we can give to other people. If we're not in a place, it's that's how it's bright. And if we don't have that fuel, our souls can't shine without the fuel that they need. And that's why we need spiritual nourishment.
Yeah,
Right.
I think maybe see if I can help John out here.
Please help me.
So I
I need help all the
I was
time.
listening to a friend of mine who is I would call him like a Bible preacher, has been for a really long time. His his depth of understanding just blows me away all the time. And this is something that I think may be controversial in some aspects, but I think that some people, myself included, being raised like going to church, didn't really understand, or like myself, am I able to articulate body, soul, and spirit the way it was explained to me? That helps me to understand it and articulate it is that we have this body, which is a vessel, it's a clay vessel, dirt, water, whatever you want to call it. They call it, like your wife calls you a dirt bag. Anyway, and then you have your spirit, which is your energy to move this body and to move, to act in certain ways. And then you have your soul, which is that part of you that feels. And he's explained it to me, and I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering this, but he said that the Hebrew word for soul is nephesh, which is like this part of your, like your tongue and your throat that just, like, it's super passive. It just feels. It doesn't do anything. And so, Braca, when I hear you talking about spirituality being that key, it's like, I mean, we're talking about food, but we're talking about nourishment, right? Even the word soul is like talking about this part of you, and that we need the right nourishment for how we were built. So I can't go and have antifreeze, even though it might look good and smell sweet. I can't drink it. It doesn't nourish me. It just wrecks me. Even though I might look at it and think that it's good, and maybe someone told me it was good and convinced me that I should do it, it's going to kill me. But if I eat the right food, right, the fruit when it's ripe on the vine, that actually does nourish my body. And so in that way, it sounds like to me you're saying you got to get the right food for how you were built.
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautifully explained. Exactly. And the nefesh is the lowest level of the soul. That's the part of the soul that's connected to the physical body. Exactly. That's amazing that you learned that. And our souls.
Nobody knows that word, Braca, I don't think. That's me and you.
That's amazing.
Y'all went to the same school and class together, didn't you?
I don't know if they talked about that at Harvard. I don't know where.
Amazing. Our souls are connected to it's a part of God. So it's a divine part of us. That's why no bag of potato chips will fill that hole. It's a totally different part of us than our stomach, so it just won't do it. And neither will the drugs or the alcohol, but they bring temporary comfort. They block out pain. And they bring temporary comfort. And when a person is starving for more pleasure in their life, that's it. It numbs the pain. That's what it does. And so, comfort. This rabbi was so amazing, and he used to say, "What's the opposite of pleasure? It's not pain. It's comfort. Comfort stops us from experiencing true pleasure." Pain can sometimes be a part of pleasure. There's tremendous pain when we give birth, but it leads to the ultimate pleasure. There could be tremendous pain in climbing a mountain, but we enjoy the challenge. Pain can be a part of pleasure sometimes, but comfort cuts us off from achieving real pleasure in life. So that's when we can become aware that pleasure is what we really need, that expands our consciousness, and that's how we can overcome addictions. It may not be all we need to overcome addictions. We may need therapeutic help, like I was saying, because if a person has been through abuse or neglect in their childhood, then the spiritual nourishment may not even be able to get through, because there are blockages, and those blockages have to be resolved so that the spiritual, although they can help, you can get spiritual nourishment while you're getting therapeutic help, because you're building up your soul so that it can shine out. As the clouds dissipate, it will be able to shine through when you've gotten enough nourishment.
So I guess let's try this. Give me one last really strong push on why spirituality might be the best. Do you have anything else to add to what you've already mentioned?
Is it the best? Well, there's nothing to lose by adding greater pleasure to your life. What's there to lose? There's nothing to buy. There's no gimmicks. People go on so many different diets. They spend fortunes, and it's called yo-yo dieting. They lose a ton of weight. They gain it back and forth. There's nothing to buy here. Just add greater pleasure to your life. That's all it takes. And it's within your power. You have the power. You don't have to wait for anybody else to do anything. You open a window, you turn on the music, you start dancing, you call or text somebody lonely. The next time that you feel like overeating, and you've had enough to eat, your stomach is full, people think I'm still hungry. You're hungry, but you're not physically hungry. You're spiritually hungry. So bring more joy into your life. Bring more pleasure into your life. And when you get in the habit of doing it, when you develop, they say that it takes 10 repetitions to develop a new good habit if you do it with joy. Otherwise, it takes about 200 repetitions to develop a new good habit. So if you do it with joy 10 times, the next time you feel like overeating, say, is it my body that's hungry or my soul? And then do something for your soul, something that brings your soul pleasure. In the widest sense of the word, do something that brings you joy.
All right. I guess I'm ready. Let's do the deciding factor. Are you ready, Alton?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
Now it's time for our deciding factor.
All right, I'll kick it off. Let's do this. So, can spirituality be the key to overcoming addictions? Any addiction, food addiction, sex addiction, alcoholism, whatever it may be. So, we went through this conversation, and I still think I'm really struggling with the true aspect of spirituality. I think my vision of it is different, because it sounds like you're on it, Alton, but I'm just not seeing it. So what I think to me, it seems like it's really, when it comes to addictions, it's more of your support group around you and people helping you. Now, if that's a part of spirituality, maybe, but to me, it doesn't seem like that's really the key. For me, it's like, I think there's more to it because, even thinking about when I went through depression, if it weren't for the people or the counselors in particular, we had Dr. John Huber on here. He was actually one of the guys that really helped me through it. And he would show me these things and help me recognize how I was handling all these negative thoughts and everything. And he really pushed me through it. And I remembered having that pressure, just really tight chest. And then when we were having a conversation one day, and he said one little thing, and then all of a sudden, boom, just gone. And I got past that. So for me, I can't say it really is. I think there's more to it. It was interesting about the 5-step ladder, though, because I think it still confused me a little, but it was interesting to see some of these steps that you were talking about. So, yeah.
Well, what did he say to you that lifted it off you?
It was, I honestly don't remember, but I think it was just about letting go and that things will just happen how they're supposed to happen is, I think, the gist of what we were talking about. And it's like, I think he told me that multiple times. And then something happened the day or two before. And I started to think, what if I just stop and just stop putting so much effort in? And I think that's what he got to that day. And we were just like, I'm good. I'll be okay. It'll work out whatever way it needs to work out. And that'll be that.
Can I just say that I see that as a type of spiritual awakening? It's a let go, let God moment. In a way, you're trusting, and this is what happened to me in my life. This was the tremendous change that happened, that I began to trust that there was an ultimate good in the world. There's an ultimate good purpose. Even if things don't feel that way right now, I can sort of trust that there's some good planning involved here, that there's some good ultimate plan. So I think I'm talking about spirituality in a bigger, and I think that many times people think of it in a narrow sense, that spirituality involves going to church or going to synagogue. Whatever. It's way, way more. It infuses our entire lives and our entire beings.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, to me, it was like, maybe it's the distraction from whatever, like you mentioned earlier, right? It was a distraction from wanting to dig in the garbage can. It was wanting to do something else, whether it's love someone else. For me, it would probably be fishing, just that mental distraction of wanting to get that pleasure level that we talked about.
Well, somebody said to me when I was speaking about this once, so are you saying you should just distract yourself from the eating? I said, well, the eating is the distraction. What you're really after in life is true pleasure. These comforts are the distraction. Going fishing, it's not a distraction. You're bringing pleasure into your life. This is what we're here for. And we distract ourselves with addictions. We distract ourselves from not having enough pleasure in our life. So go out and get the pleasure.
What you got, Alton?
I think this one's another one that to me is a challenge to to decompress here. But I think that I'm going to try to phrase this right. I think if I stood at one of the churches that I've been going to and I said, hey, y'all, the meaning of life is to go have pleasure, then people would just train wreck on that concept if I just left it there. Mm-hmm. But if I said, what's one word to describe heaven when we're with God and we don't have, sin and all of these bad things, I would bet money that it's going to be joy. And so if we can use joy and pleasure somewhat interchangeably and not get too tied up on the semantics there, what I'm hearing you say, Braca, is that we all have to recognize the hunger for joy. And so once we recognize that, we need to understand, well, how do we actually feed that? So, you know, I talk a lot on our podcast about how I need to go motorcycle racing right now, always. And if you said, hey, Alton, here's $1 million, or you told anybody, here's $1 million, instantly someone's happy now. Why? Was it the paper? Was it the trash bag that it was in? No. In their mind, it's like, now I can get the girl. Now I can get my Ducati. Okay, now I'm riding in the Ducati really fast and it sounds good and it's loud. And my wife, you know, she just really loves me now. And my kids think I'm cool. And what just happened? I associated that with joy. That was like the path. And to me, who I have probably more experience with people who struggled with many types of addictions than I'd like, I think that that's the true, they're searching for pleasure and they think that they found it, or they got hooked on like a prostitute of pleasure, you know, like a fake. And I think that that's the issue. And John, when we had John Huber on here, we talked a little bit about suicide, which I think what John Huber exposed to me, he goes, Alton, people never want to commit suicide. He said the instant that they try and fail, it's like huge regret. What they're trying to accomplish is that there's too much pain and they just want it to stop, is the way he explained it. And I'm like, that makes so much sense to me. And to me, it brings the point home of how much we need joy, and whether or not pain is the opposite of that or not, it's a very contrasting thing that we want to avoid. And so having written that dissertation, I'm going to say that I'm in agreement, Braca, on the idea that if you are unaware of your spiritual nature, you're never going to look for the right food, and and if you get filled, it's going to be by luck. And I think that God put inside of us all that desire to search and reach our full potential, which to me, in my own head, is like kind of that joy of us using our gifts and spreading it, right? Like, what are you doing? You've written all these children's books, and then you're like, you know what? I had this experience, like I have to share it. I mean, could you not share it even, right? I suspect it would be very hard to stop you from sharing your story. And I think that that's, you know, I wish everyone was at that point where they were just like, I had this thing that I have to spread. I have to spread this love, this joy, this hope. So that's my deciding factor, whatever I just said.
Looks like I'm the odd man out yet again. Oh well. I'll get it.
I think you agree too. It's just the terminology that's different, you know, that's all. Yes.
Very possible. So tell us, you know, if they want to read, you know, you've got 38 children's books, which might be better fit for me, but but you of course got this Looking for God in the Garbage Can. They can get that on Amazon, right?
Yeah, all my books are on my Amazon author page, Bracha Getz, Amazon author. I'll show you. Here's this. This is I Want to Be Famous. This is a boy. You know, so many children want to be famous. He wants the spotlight to shine on until he gets fame overnight.
That's a caricature of myself. I mean, I got the hair and everything. Okay, so to spell your name, it's not how it sounds though. So it's BRACHA and then Goetz. Now, we can also get you on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram as well, right? And harass you that way?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll post all those links down below if you want to check it out. Make sure you click on those. So if this book isn't for you, well, she's got 38 other books that
yeah.
you can mail to me, you know? So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of this. It's still crazy. I cannot believe your addiction was so bad that you were digging out of trash cans. I mean, man.
I think that there's a whole other podcast in about that freedom of just being authentic and putting that out there and the strength of that. I mean, really, right? Like that takes a big, to me, a big motivation. I mean, I don't know, but
look at it this way. It definitely built your immunity up and you won't have to worry about catching COVID now. So, you know, you got that working for you.
Anything that you want to leave us with, Braca?
Anything? What was that?
Sorry.
What?
Anything that you want to leave us with?
It was a pleasure to be. I was just wanted to tell you that this guy, he becomes famous overnight from a YouTube video. And then he discovers that really, guess what? It's the spotlight from within. That one can last forever. So that's it, guys. We just got to fill up our souls with joy. And then, you know, you don't need all that much food after that. You know, you just need what you need, and then you can just spread joy around the world. Thank you guys for what you're doing so much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
All right.
Which level of pleasure was it? I don't know, like all of them, you know. So.
It's still the physical. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, guys. Y'all say bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of The Deciding Factor, giving you food for thought on real life issues. Be sure to click, like, and subscribe to this podcast, as well as all your big social media outlets, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to check out our website at thedecidingfactorpodcast.com and give us comments and feedback. Until next time, stay safe and remember to keep an open mind.